Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, a podcast about leaving self-doubt in the dust, punching fear in the face, and taking bold action toward your biggest dreams. I'm Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Ooh, I am excited for this one. Welcome to the show, everyone. Robert Lucas. Say hi, everyone.
Hello.
So Robert and I have been working together for a little while. He's one of my favorite writers. So he's a copywriter like I am. And for those of you who are new to the show, that means we specialize in sales writing. But I love it because it is a deceptively creative field. You know, it's not all just trying to find a million ways to buy now. There's a lot of storytelling and craft and knowing how to appeal to people that goes into the thought process behind copywriting. And I think Robert is fantastic at this. So I am so happy to have you on the show. Earlier, we were talking about how you even got into this world, and you were working with me and another friend of mine, Chris, who's also been on the show. And I'm excited for you to share this story. So let's just jump right in.
Yeah, for sure. So before getting into copywriting, actually, I was a technical writer and I worked at an IT auditing firm. And it was about as fun as it sounds. I love the company and I love the people. It was a fantastic first job right out of college, but it was not exactly exciting material for me. So I knew that I wanted to get into some sort of freelance writing. Long story short, I got into writing content. So when I first started in 2017, I was writing a lot of blogs. I was doing some email copywriting here and there, but it really, I don't know, I kind of knew that I wanted to do something more. And once I discovered the world of direct response copywriting, I kind of fell in love. Like you were saying, I think it's really fun because there's so many different facets to it. There's a lot of creativity. There's a little bit of salesmanship. If you're freelance, there's some entrepreneurial aspects to it. So I just kind of fell in love. And one of the things that I really liked were these projects called sales pages, which are basically like landing pages, a page on a website that tries to get you to try a product or buy a product or do something, basically. And I really gravitated towards those, but I wasn't getting a lot of those projects from clients. So I kind of thought about it, and I was inspired by another copywriter named Justin Blackman, who did this crazy thing where he wrote 100 sales. Wait, what did he do? He wrote 100 headlines per day for 100 days in a row, which is, yeah.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And it's crazy on its own, but it's even crazier when you think about the fact that like Justin is a father and has a family, and at the time had a full-time job too. So wow. Yeah. So that was really inspiring to me, just that he was able to say like, hey, here's an ambitious project that I want to tackle. So I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. So I was kind of thinking about that one day when I was driving from Nashville, where I live. I was going up to Louisville, where I'm from originally. I was going to spend some time over the weekend. And I was thinking, how can I do something like that where I get to do more of these sales page projects that I want to do? And I kind of got this idea of like, okay, November's coming up. What if I wrote a sales page per day for 29 days in November? And then on the 30th day, I could do kind of like a digest of everything that I'd done. And so that's what I did. I wrote, I guess you could call them like a mini sales page every day from November 1st through November 29th. And by the time it was done, I didn't do the full like review on day 30. I took a long shower and didn't think about it for a while.
Which is great for the creative process. You know that I harp on that, like take a break.
Yeah, it was one of the hottest showers I've ever taken. I just cranked it up and let everything wash off of me. But an interesting thing is that like during that project, I had an email list of like 3 whole people. And a couple months after I finished that project up, somebody tagged me in a Facebook post and they said, hey, Crystal Rzakowski is talking about this sales page project that you did, and he's kind of calling you out. And I was like, who is Chris Orzakowski and what's he saying about me? So I went and I checked out the blog post, and he mentioned the project and, kind of talked about how it impressed him and how I had stopped emailing my list. And so I was like, oh man, like I'm kind of getting called out here. So anyway, I reached out to Chris and we kind of formed a connection, and which led into me going through his coaching program, which was awesome, and a whole lot of other things. But it all started from this 3-person email list and this crazy project that, I just didn't know where it was going to lead, but I knew that if I put in the time, I just kind of had faith that something good would come of it.
I think, yeah, that's such a great story. And, Chris is a client of mine too. And I work with Robert at Chris's agency. And that's kind of how all of this came about. I just think that that's fantastic, because in coaching writers, like I've done for a while now, I think one of the biggest hangups that they have is like, how do people know I'm a good writer? And I usually give the standard non-answer, which is writer's rights. Okay, but what do I write? You solved that problem here for yourself. Like, okay, so here's the thing. Here's the kind of project that I want more of. And I don't really necessarily see like the clear vision, the clear step-by-step path to getting more of those projects, but I know I want to get really good at that project. So I'm just going to start writing those things. And you removed that obstacle from your own path. And there was recently a podcast that I was listening to, or a video that I watched online, because I'm interested in learning more about drawing. And, the creative artists, visual artists have the same struggles that writers do, I've found, where do I start? There's so many options. It's overwhelming. I don't even know how to get good at this. How do I practice? And, if you practice 10 different things, there's only so much you can do to get good at any one of those 10 things. Whereas if you pick one thing to focus on it and you just keep practicing and practicing and practicing it, you almost have no choice but to get really, really good at that one thing, because you're thinking at it from every possible angle. And it's like evaluating your own work as you learn a little thing, implement it, get a little bit better. So I love that. I love that. I think that's a fantastic way to establish expertise without waiting for someone to come along and tell you, hey, I want you to write this thing. And you don't even know if you're any good at it because you've never done the practice. So I think that's great. And then the other thing that I thought was really cool about this, so I didn't even know that all of this had happened. I didn't even know about the sales page journey experiment thing. I just knew that I had worked with you before, kind of as your chief, as your editor, and helping you improve your writing. And I just think it's really, really interesting along the way that so many people think, I have to have this plan. I have to have these goals that I'm aiming toward. And your goal was the next step, which was, I want more sales page projects. So I'm going to get really good at sales pages. And simply by focusing on that one thing in front of you, it led to all of these other avenues that you could explore, and all of these connections with people that were in strategic positions to help you grow your career. I just think that that is so cool. And I can't stress that enough for everybody listening. Just take the next step. Sometimes it opens up all kinds of pathways that you didn't think about. Yeah.
Well, and I think I don't know, I think I really identify with that idea because I don't know, we always hear follow your passion, right? And it sounds nice, but I think the reality is there's only a very small percentage of the population who actually knows what their passion is, right? But for most other people, they have no idea. Maybe they have interests or they have inclinations towards a specific thing, but it's really hard to call something a full-blown passion. So I'm really big on follow your interests. If you feel a little bit pulled towards something, put some time into it and see what it leads to. And really that's just been kind of the story of me and copywriting. It wasn't I graduated college and said, I want to be a copywriter. I didn't know what it was. Right.
That is so funny. There are so many of us that had no idea that this was even a thing when we got started in the field. People ask me about that a lot. When did you know you were going to be a copywriter? And I was like, when I got laid off from my last job and then read a book. And they're like, seriously? Yeah. Somebody told me about a book that was about copywriting. And in a moment of desperation, I was like, all right, well, I wanted to be a TV writer, but since I spent all this time learning writing and storytelling for TV, I guess I could learn it for sales too. Like that seems like it makes sense. It's better than like selling drugs.
Generally, yeah, I would agree.
And so when I started down this path in this career, I had no idea what it was. It was just pure happenstance that I fell into this. At no point did I set out to be a copywriter until I was already in it. So, yeah. I think so much of it is just like putting in the effort, just putting one foot in front of the other, and just kind of like looking around and paying attention to what seems like a good next step and what seems like a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. And because I was in school to get better at screenwriting and to get better at development, which are the people that find the stories for different network brands and bring those to light. I was already following down that creative path towards writing and getting good at a specific subset of writing, which is screenwriting. And that way, when the copywriting path opened up, I already knew from practice that I had a certain level of skills here. And it was just a matter of transferring those skills to this other field and figuring out how that fit and getting really good at that. And I think that's something that a lot of us neglect. Like we put these skills that we develop, especially as they pertain to creativity or like business, into boxes. And never shall these boxes overlap. Well, they overlap all the time. So a kind of being good at writing means that you're probably good at multiple kinds of writing. It's just a different way of thinking or different approach, different goals for each kind. If you're good at one kind of artwork, well, you're probably good at painting, drawing, a little bit of everything, but there's one or two fields where you really excel. And I love that about this because choosing your focus, like we said, versus spreading it out across 10 different disciplines. And not really ever getting good at one. Just pick that one.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of that Bruce Lee quote. What is it? Like, I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. Ooh, something like that.
Shivers.
Yeah, that's what that reminded me of.
Yeah, say what you will about adages and cliches and stuff like that, but the reason that those float around and they stay in our human history and our popular vernacular is because they're actually true, guys. Like there's a reason that Bruce Lee quote sticks around and keeps circling around, because yes, somebody that practices that same kick 10,000 times has gotten really, really good at that one thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And probably is the only person that you can hire to do that thing, by the way. Talk about expertise and leverage. If you get really, really good at one thing, well, then you could charge the big bucks for that thing, right?
Yep, exactly. 100%.
Yeah, there's this one lady out there that I've seen in the visual arts that she pours resin paints on a tabletop and she makes tabletops look like crystal geodes.
I've seen those. Those are
fantastic. Awesome. And she does these great big pieces of art that are like bigger than I am. Wall art, tabletops, all kinds of stuff. And she was the first one that I saw really exploring this on social media. I've seen a lot of imitators since then, but every time, oh God. And of course I can't remember her name right now. I'm going to put it in the show notes though. I'm going to find her after this. She's in Germany, I believe, and does these massive custom order ones. And because she created this art, she can kind of dictate what she charges and how long it takes her to make this thing, and talk about leverage and power.
100%. That's awesome. Well, I feel like I'm just literally like pulling fragments here, but that reminds me of the story about Picasso, right? Where he's like doodling on a napkin in a restaurant, and a woman comes up and she's like, can I have that, or can I buy it, or whatever? And he says, yeah, it's $10,000 or some exorbitant price or something like that. And she says, but it took you 30 seconds to do. And he's like, yeah, but it took me, 20, 30 years to learn how to do that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's developing expertise and like your own, niche or your own thing that only you can do has a lot of power to it.
Yeah. You never have to apologize for following shiny threads with me, my friend. You know that I love jumping from story to story and seeing what kind of points connect. I mean, that's the whole point of creativity to me, connecting unrelated ideas.
Yes, 100%. I feel like that's exactly what it is. And the more creative stuff I do, the more I realize that's pretty much it right there.
Well, and there's one interesting thing, and forgive me, I'm going to go a little bit off script here because I did not prepare you for this. So I'm going to throw you into the lion's den a little bit. So I know a little bit about your history because I've been working with you since you were a newish writer. And I remember at one point that we had a conversation that was something along the lines of, okay, Angie, but is my work any good? And the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because like it struck me like right in the feels, because I remember when I went through that phase of development when I was a writer too. Okay, but I feel like it's good, but you who knows what you're doing, can you please tell me if this is any good? And so one critical piece of creative development, whether you're a writer, you're a baker, you're an artist, you're a photographer, is going to be someone else's judgment of your work, right? But what I think that you did right in speaking to me, if I could sound like a perfect egomaniac right now, is, I have a certain expertise. I have a certain respect for the craft. I know what it takes you to think about it. And you asked me for my thoughts on your work and how you could get better versus someone on the streets or like mom who's never read or a brother or sister or a girlfriend, like somebody that is inexperienced in this, that's giving their opinion that's not really based on any kind of facts. So the reason I bring that up, and this is kind of a convoluted way to get to the point, is as a creative person, developing your skills in your business is as much about developing your own taste and style as it is about getting good at that thing that you specialize in. And I think so many people stop themselves before they start because they ask the wrong people for feedback along the way. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think finding the right mentor is one of, if not the most valuable thing you can do as an entrepreneur or as a creative. And working with you and working with Chris and having you all say like, hey, like, you kind of know what you're doing. That I feel like has made me able to continue being a copywriter and doing what I do. And I think that's just a crucial stage of development, as you're saying. It's like, I think there's this idea that, you shouldn't need validation or that you should be able to do all this stuff on your own. But the reality is, like, I think as a creative, there comes a point where you do need validation. You do need someone who you respect and who knows your craft to come along and say, hey, you can actually do this, maybe tweak these couple of things, but like overall, you're on track. And I think being able to do that and ask that question of a mentor requires a level of confidence in terms of like, hey, I am not my work. So if this mentor says my work is not good, my total self-esteem isn't shattered, but it also requires a level of humility because you are putting yourself up there, or you're putting your work up there on the chopping block. And you have to do that if you want to improve. So yeah, I think it's just, you have to be dedicated to the craft, but you also have to recognize that your entire self-worth isn't based in your level of skill.
That's such a great point too, because, part of the reason that there are people like the Geode lady or Bruce Lee that stand out is they got so good at the one thing that they were good at. They're passionate about that thing. And then anybody else that came along and told them, but you're probably not going to make money at that, or maybe you should try this thing over here. They just said, no, this is the thing that I'm doing. This is what I want to do. This is what I feel called to do. And they listened to that. And so they had that mix of, like you mentioned, that confidence where just because someone didn't like their art didn't mean that someone didn't like them. It wasn't a judgment of their character. It was like, I disagree with you. I don't really like your art. And they go, okay, cool. Well, you don't have to like my art. I'm going to be over here doing my thing. And because they just tapped into that inner reserve of like, this is me, this is what I like, this is what I'm good at, this is the creation that I want to put out into the world, they eventually found their fans. And I think that's so critical in this process, because especially as a creative person, I just don't understand this advice that people kind of get locked into their head. Like, if you're listening to career advice and how to blend in on LinkedIn and make sure that your corporate headshot is up to date and you should look like this, like if you're a creative person, stop that shit right now. I want you to stand out for your own unique brilliance. And Robert is like over here laughing as that. You can't see me because I'm on video, but I'm
nodding my head.
I'm bouncing on my little, my yoga ball chair and just fist pumping the air, but stop it. Stop blending in. If you are a creative person and you were meant to shine, you were meant to stand out, you were meant to find your own unique thing. And yeah, maybe you're not the only person in the world who's doing that thing, but your unique voice, your taste, if you're a visual artist or if you're a cook, a chef, a baker, like that experience, your background, your life, your taste, all of that combines to something that's completely unique that nobody else can do. And at best, they're going to be a poor imitation of you and your style if they try to copy you. So just focus on being you and getting really, really good at that thing that lights you up that you want to bring out to the world. Yes.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and I think that's one of the, I think that's why people love and appreciate you, Angie, is because you are able, because you're bouncing on your yoga ball chair and you're pumping your fist. And I don't know, I think creative people are oftentimes by nature sensitive people. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm speaking, for myself here. And I think it can be,
people think I'm a ball busting badass, but I'm telling you, when somebody tells me my writing sucks, I'm like, really? You don't like me?
Did you mean it? But yeah, I think I don't know. I think that's been one of my big realizations over the past couple of years is that you need people around you, whether it's a friend, a parent, a therapist, a coach, whatever, you need people who are going to hype you up and say hey, you're really good at what you do. And you need to keep pushing forward in that because we're all going to have days where somebody says something mean on social media or a client rips our writing to shreds. But if you have that team or that person who you can go back to and they can kind of build you up and remind you of who you are and what you're here for, that is one of the most powerful things that you can have.
Mm-hmm. And that's so critical too, as you're growing. I mean, the reason that it hurts so much and that most people that are creative, that identify as creative, are so sensitive is because we understand the pain of bringing something out of our heads into existence. That's a skill that somebody that's not creative doesn't understand. I remember once when I was still working at a corporate job as a copywriter, that somebody in the signage department, this was a retail chain that I worked for, and they had to put signs in the store. And so his job was to deal with space constraints and booking printers and negotiating in caps and all that good stuff. He came over to my cube to ask me a question, and he saw me staring at a blank document. And he said, "Wait, is that how you start this project?" And I said, "Yeah, all of these projects start in the copy department." And he goes, "I don't know why, but it just never occurred to me that you start with a blank Word document." And I was like, yeah, the sign doesn't come to me already made. I have to make it. And so for somebody that's not creative, that doesn't know how to have this idea in my head and then figure out how to execute it on paper, in a baking rack, whatever your art is, it just does not compute to these people. So that makes it valuable to them because they don't know what it takes to create this, but it also makes it very subjective and very sensitive for us because you put a little piece of yourself into everything that you create when you're a creative person. And, I got very vulnerable the other day in an email that I sent to my list, which, Permission to Kick Ass, this podcast that you're listening to right now is my passion project. I feel very, very strongly about this. I think I'm doing some good in the world, and I'm just following my heart, and yeah, we'll see how it works out. Grand experiment. I had several people unsubscribe from my email list with a vulnerable topic I sent recently. And I went, like you said, to my group of people that pump me up and tell me, nope, you're doing this. You have a mission, you know who you're talking to, and those people unsubscribing doesn't mean everybody hates you and what you're trying to do. It just means that those people weren't for you, and this is where your journey ends. And I was like, I needed that pep talk today because I was about to be like, look, I don't know why you unsubscribe, but you need to be back on my list because I'm doing some really good things and I care a lot.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so interesting too, because I feel like it's one thing for, like if you're doing client work and for the client to say like, hey, I don't like this at all. That's one thing, but it's a whole other thing when you send an email to your list and people unsubscribe. It's like, it's a different type of pain.
Mm-hmm. And they mark you as spam. I never signed up for these things. I'm like, actually, according to my records, you signed up for these emails 9 days ago, but who's counting? And also, I have literally no idea who you are, person. So why did I go out into the world and seek out your address and add it to my list if I didn't even know you existed before you marked me as spam? Whatever. I'm just going to rant
torment them, of course.
Because I don't have any other things to obsess about in my creative business building.
Right. Yeah, I have nothing better to do but find random email addresses and spam them.
Torment strangers, or today hijack somebody else's training with obsessive talks about king cake, which is my latest find being in New Orleans. As we're recording this, I don't know when you're going to be listening to this, those of you on the other end of it, but we're recording this in February. It's the day after Mardi Gras. And I have been obsessed with this giant king cake that my Airbnb host delivered to me over the weekend, which I had to finish according to tradition by midnight last night. So yeah, today I was on another training meeting with a bunch of other creatives and everybody was just talking about king cakes and babies. And this person was like, what just happened? And I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack it, but we're just having fun.
So what is a king cake?
A king cake is it's a special tradition with French origins. And usually there's a little like trinket. In this case, it was a little plastic naked baby that gets hidden somewhere in the cake as it's baked. And this cake that she brought to me, it's this lovely, like kind of bread-like texture. It's got some almond marzipan and cinnamon running through it. And it's got some vanilla icing on it. It's delightful. Very, very tasty cake. And the idea is that this little trinket, this baby gets hidden somewhere in the cake. And whoever finds that thing in their slice of cake gets named the Mardi Gras king or queen. Okay. I don't know what happens beyond that because I'm still new to Mardi Gras traditions, but I was like, it's a big deal to find the baby. But hey, newsflash, I'm the only one here eating the cake, so I already know who's going to find the baby, so I don't need to hide it.
So you win. It's a great game.
I win. I love when I win the things. Who knew that I only had to be the only one playing the game to win things all the time?
You get to eat a whole cake. And you win. That's awesome.
I ate a whole cake and I won. Winning at everything. See, all the life lessons come from eating baked goods as far as I'm concerned. So
I'm going to have to get on that then.
Mm-hmm.
Do some more.
Oh, yeah. So I get why it hurt my feelings so much that, I'm sharing this deep, vulnerable thing and somebody marks me as spam and wants to unsubscribe from my list. It's because I had to put that little piece of myself on paper. And, as invincible as I make myself seem with the tough permission to kick ass brands, that's still, it gets hard sometimes, especially if you're working really hard and you're run down or like it's freaking cold in New Orleans right now, to separate yourself and not take that as a reflection of like, hey, I don't like you. And even if she doesn't like me, I don't know who this person is. So why do I care if she doesn't like me? That's cool. I'm going to go focus on loving the people that do like me and that I like them. And she's free to live her life with people that she doesn't like. So I get it. I mean, something about creating out of thin air makes it really hard to separate ourselves from the work sometimes.
Yeah. That's one of the things that really used to freak me out when I first started writing copy. Because I would think about like, okay, I'm waking up in the morning and my job today is to make something that didn't exist before. It's got to go out of my brain and into the world. And that's like, I feel like that's one of those things where I don't know what it's called, but like if you say or look at the same word too much, you start to like disassociate from it and it doesn't feel like a word anymore, right?
This is not a word.
Yeah, that's kind of what the creative process feels like to me sometimes. Like if you think about it too much, it'll drive you crazy. But like that reminded me of earlier this week, I was having like some quote unquote writer's block. And it just kind of had this realization of like the best thing to do when you're in that position, like when you're trying to make something and you keep hitting this wall and you're getting nowhere. is to just start saying yes to ideas. And it's not about like coming up with the idea or the thing immediately, but it's, again, building up that momentum and saying like, yes, I'm going to write like this crappy sentence, and then I'm going to write another sentence after that that's not too great. And halfway down the page, the sentences are going to start to get better, and this is going to start to take shape into something that is actually workable. So yeah, that just made me think of that. And I think that's very important for the creative process, is to just start saying yes to ideas and see where it takes you.
No, I think that's a fantastic point to bring up, because, okay, so if you are listening to this podcast and you are new to creativity, to writing, to baking, whatever that is, newsflash, the muse does not exist. The flash of inspiration is not coming. The not so glamorous side of being a professional creative means that I have to put my ass in a chair and my fingers on the keyboard, whether I feel like writing today or not. And I have to put words on a page, whether I feel like they're good or not. And I love what you said about saying yes to the idea, because I think I had a similar idea of a concept. I call it turning off your internal editor. While you're creating, your only job is to create. And it doesn't matter if it's the shittiest idea to ever exist on the face of the earth. Your job right now is not to judge it. It's just to create it, to allow it space to exist. You're going to come back later and put on your editor hat and be like, this is not the best idea I ever had. I'm not going to show that to my client. But, oh, hey, this one that I got about 2 pages in, there's a little seed of something that's pretty good. I think I'm going to run with that. And I've made the joke before with newer writers that I've trained that they've probably only seen 10% of anything I've ever written. And I'm not talking about the things that I've published publicly, even though I'm a pretty prolific writer, public facing. I'm talking about everything I've ever written. People of all my published work think there's 10 times more than that you've never read, because I will not let it see the light of day. But that's the beauty of the creation too, because that first part is yours and yours alone. And you kind of get to play in the mud and get as dirty as you want to. Nobody ever has to see it. And then you go take a shower and you come out looking all presentable, and they go, oh yeah, that's the person that I know. But before, you were like a dirty mud monster. Throw things around.
If you ever do merch, Dirty Mud Monster is a shirt that I would buy. I'll be the first buyer for the Dirty Mud Monster shirt.
Dirty Mud Monster. I'm going to have to do that. If you're a graphic artist listening to the show right now, send me your ideas and concepts for Dirty Mud Monster. I had another joke in another episode about respects the eyebrows, because that's part of the reason that I don't release the YouTube recordings of these podcast episodes, even though people keep telling me I should. You can see on my face when I have thoughts about something, and usually it starts with the eyebrows raising about 5 feet in the air, jumping clean off my face. So somebody was like, yeah, respect the eyebrows. I'm like, yeah, I turn off the video when the eyebrows are about to do some things to give me away, betray my opinions.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think you can keep the YouTube videos and the eyebrows, and it's just kind of let that be the internal thing.
Mm-hmm. How are you feeling today? The eyebrows are clean off her forehead, so she's feeling snarky.
Angie has a lot of ideas today. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, I love you got to create, and creation is messy. And, if you're a sculptor, you're going to get covered in clay or plaster. If you're a painter, you're going to get covered in paint. If you're a photographer, you're probably out traipsing through the woods trying to find the natural light. Like, creation is dirty and messy. And the real art comes from coming back and fixing it later and turning it into something lovely after you've thrown everything against the wall.
That brings up a question that I have for you, because this is something that it took me a while to learn. And I'm interested to see if it's something that you practice as well. How do you, or are you able to tell the difference between, hey, this is a day where I just need to sit down and put words on the page and just grind through it, versus, no, I actually need some rest and I need to take some time away from this? What's your process for evaluating the difference in those two things?
Ooh, throwing me a curveball. I like it.
Yeah, putting you on the spot here.
Turnabout is fair play. That's good.
And if you want time to think about it, I can speak on it for a second too. Okay.
I was like, I think if I had to articulate a process, I don't think I've actually verbalized this before. So we're going to get off the cuff, Angie, right here. I think there's a couple different ways I do it. If I'm getting up and I don't really feel like writing, the ideas aren't flowing, I'll usually like take a walk or take a shower and then sit down and set a timer. And, of course, again, you can't see this, but I have this little hexagon timer that I can just flip it on its side and set it for like 15, 30 minutes. And my whole job is not to look at anything else until I hear that timer go off. I don't even look at the timer because I know it's going to go off when the clock has run down. And that'll usually tell me where my head is at in terms of being able to create. Because if I've, at the end of 30 minutes, written like a paragraph, okay, maybe I need to go on another walk. Maybe I need to do a little bit of research. Maybe I need to take my mind off this altogether and go wash dishes or, take a walk to the local coffee shop and set myself up there. You'd be amazed at what kind of ideas come from willfully disconnecting yourself. But usually on a writing day that I've set aside, and I literally book writing days for days that I don't have calls scheduled so that I can't be interrupted and I'm not worried about looking at the clock. And this is my day to just create. I resisted doing that for a long, long time. And now that I've done it, I'm like, why the hell, dumbass, did you wait so long to just block off writing days? So I'm in a writing day and I need to create. I set a timer and I create as much as I can. And then I go do something else. And I set a timer again and I create as much as I can. The caveat is that I am very cognizant of my emotional state. And if I'm waking up a certain day and I've got strong feelings, or I'm feeling the onset of a cold or something like that, something that indicates that I am not in a creation mindset, that is a day where I know straight away, this is probably a rest day. At least take this first half to take yourself to a movie, give yourself a little home pedicure or whatever it is that makes you relax and makes the feelings kind of go back to where they're supposed to be. Do what you need to do to process and then try again this afternoon. And if I try again this afternoon, or if the mood still persists the afternoon, well, then that was a rest day. And I'm not going to feel guilty about that because that means that tomorrow I'm going to be rested and much more likely to be able to create. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think it's like, I don't know. I think that's just one of the most interesting things about like being a creative entrepreneur is that like, it's kind of like you're two people, right? There's like you who's running the business and then there's you who's the creative, and it's all about managing the energy and the well-being of that creative person while still like doing the entrepreneurial side of running the business. And I think it's just such an interesting balance you have to strike.
Absolutely. And especially, I mean, as a writer in particular, you never know where the idea is going to come from. And I've always thought of creativity as the ability to see a connection between two things that don't necessarily have a connection on the surface. So like yesterday, I had a whole list of things that I wanted to write. Yesterday being Mardi Gras, as we're recording this, I wound up not writing anything because I was so fascinated by this workshop that I signed up for, where I went to a local coffee shop and socially distanced and masked and everything, learned how to do sewing and beading in the style of the Mardi Gras Indians. And I learned about this whole culture and backgrounds. And I left there. So I went in thinking I was learning how to bead, which I did. I sewed a little flower and it's like dinky and amateur, but I love it because it was almost meditative to just sit there and create something that I really couldn't think about beyond what's the next bead that I'm going to put in here? Where do I put my needle? When I left, I had the chief of the tribe's phone number, a podcast to listen to, and an idea for a story that I wanted to write about the history of the Mardi Gras Indians, as they're called, the tribes that lead these parades. And I told him, I'd love to show this writing to you once I get it done, because I want to make sure that the story I'm telling is accurate to you and the reality that you live. So yesterday morning when I woke up, there's no way that I could have possibly planned or anticipated that I would want to write stories about Mardi Gras Indians. It just wasn't even on my radar. It wasn't even knowledge that I possessed. But suddenly out and about, I found this thing that was really interesting to me that I was like, shit, I want to write about that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I think that's awesome. And I just think like that's part of the work of being someone who is creative, is being able to is being open to that stuff, I guess. And is recognizing that like every experience, every interaction, everything you see is potential like material for your work.
It's all data. It's all input. And the more input that you have, the more you increase the chances of one idea bouncing off another somewhere in your head. And then like, it just hits you. That's the true myth of inspiration that people talk about when like this idea hit you out of nowhere. No, the idea didn't come out of nowhere. It came because you were constantly putting things in, whether that's research for writing, whether that's looking at different styles of paintings or photographs that you want to try. And then, you were out doing your thing and some sort of inspiration hit you and you were like, what if I combine this with this? There's my idea. I'm going to go do it. And I'm suddenly obsessed with producing this thing. I got to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird. It's weird how some ideas just hit you like that. And you immediately know like, hey, this is something. Like, this is that thing that I've been trying to like grasp at. It's kind of like wiping the fog off a mirror or something. And there's your idea.
Oh, that's so good. And I think the other piece to that, I almost forgot to mention it, is, okay, give yourself a rest day, but give yourself limits. If you're feeling some kind of way and today is not a creation day, it's really, really easy. If you're not practicing self-awareness, if you're not practicing discipline and making yourself create even on days that you don't necessarily feel like it, to suddenly look up and realize it's been 2 weeks since you've done anything and the money is drying up and oh shit, and then the guilt piles on and then the fear piles on and that makes it even harder to create. So give yourself a rest day, no more than 2, unless you're sick. If you're sick, take the time to rest and recuperate fully before you go back to work. Don't try and work through it. That's how you make yourself even more sick and you lose even more time. But, if you need a day or 2 to rest and recuperate, if you need a long weekend, take it. The work is going to be that much better for it. Don't try and force yourself through it. But also recognize on the other side of that, okay, well, I had my long weekend. Today, I guess, is going to be a day of shitty creations because I don't particularly feel like it and the ideas aren't there, but I got to write something anyway. So it's time to see what we can produce and just practice that habit of putting yourself in a chair, putting yourself in a studio and creating. That's where you find the real gold. It's not in the flashes of inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to your point earlier, the timer, I think really is the magic there. That's something that I started doing last year is Pomodoro timers. And it has absolutely changed the way that I work. And instead of, having this big, amorphous, 3 or 4 hour block of work, it's like, no, I have 30 minutes here and then I have a break and then I do 30 minutes again. And it's wild just how much you can get done in those short sprints.
Mm-hmm. And more often than not these days, if I set it for 30 minutes, by the time 10 or 15 minutes rolls around, I've hit my stride. I'm going pretty good. It's flowing. I don't even look up. I hear that timer go off. I turn it off. I usually keep going for another 10 or 15 minutes until I naturally hit a stopping point. But the point is to just get started and see what you can do and give yourself a time limit so that you don't feel tempted to space out or go down an internet rabbit hole. Lord knows I'm prone to doing that.
We all are.
I've had to develop so many tricks over the years to keep myself from just waking up 3 hours in a stupor. What I thought I was looking up an answer to this question and somehow I'm over here on YouTube. What is happening to me? And as a result, the timer, when you really cut out all the distractions and say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I write. I don't even need to look at the timer because I know it's going to go off. So my eyes are on this page. I need to write. I have actually found that with practicing that, I can get more done in 2 hours a day than a lot of people can get all day long sitting at their computer trying to force themselves to write. I will dump it all out in an hour, go goof off doing something, exploring a local city where I'm traveling to, come back, organize it and edit it, and then I'm done for the day. And it's like, holy shit, I never pictured that as being reality when I was stuck in a day job, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that reminds me of when I first started freelancing. I worked out of a co-working space, and it mainly catered towards people who were doing startups, like SaaS startups, software as a service, that whole thing. And so there was a lot of, like founder type people around. And this was, 3.5 years ago now. So I feel like hustle culture is kind of dying a little bit now, but back then it was alive and well. And the idea was just grind until your eyes bleed. Oof. So that's what I tried to do. And I just couldn't. I couldn't work 12-hour days, 16-hour days. And for a while, I felt bad about that until eventually I realized I'm doing different work than these other people are doing, than these founder type people are doing. Like, I'm not on calls for 8 hours and then sending emails for 4 hours. I'm doing like deep creative work, and you only have a limited reservoir of like mental ability to do that. So once I started shifting the way that I viewed my work in terms of it's about what I get done, not about the amount of hours that I work, it really changed how much I enjoyed what I was doing and how much I got done.
Exactly. Like, I've told this story before about the email series. I wrote a series of 3 emails that made $8.4 million in sales. And that was when it finally made sense to me, this idea that hours are separate from the money that I get paid. Because if I only got paid for the hours it took me to write those 3 emails, well, then that's like 2, maybe 3 hours if I agonized over every word in those emails that it took me to create that. And that's less than $100. Do you think it's fair to get paid $100 for $8.4 million worth of results? I certainly don't. And yeah, you can't know when you sit down to write or create something that it's going to be worth that much, but you have to go in understanding its potential value to people, especially based on the experience that you bring to the table. If you're new to this, you have to look at the value you think you can bring, make your best judgment, and be prepared to edit if you fall short of the marks. But part of this is we're all going to fail. We're all going to have those things that we love and this fantastic idea, think it's going to great, and then it flops. Or you think that this one idea that you pitch to the client and they love is like, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever came up with. I really hope it does well. I don't think it's going to. And then it blows your expectations out of the water. So you're not going to love every idea. You're not going to love every creation day. You're not even going to love every minute of the business that you've created. I say aim for 80-20. 80-20 applies here. If you love what you do 80% of the time and you're struggling 20% of the time, that's a pretty good gig you've got. Nobody's going to be 100% happy 100% of the time. So aim for that 80-20. You love what you do. You're covering your bills. You get to create. And 20% of the time you're dealing with annoying clients or a shortfall in the money. You're doing good. You're doing good.
Yeah, that's not a bad setup.
Not at all. Well, Robert, this has been a fantastic conversation. Hell, we even ran a little bit long, but I love it. It was worth every minute of it. You want to tell folks a little bit about you and where to find you if they want to know more?
Yeah, you can find me at robertlucas.co. I have 2 first names, technically 3, but I won't reveal my middle name publicly just yet. Honestly, that's the best place. Go to robertlucas.co. You can sign up for my email list there and pay attention to the articles I write, the emails I send, all that good stuff. And
he writes the email list now. He does. He got called out by Chris. Yes. So you will get good emails from Robert. Trust me.
All right. Yeah, I email them now.
Fantastic. Thanks for being on the show, Robert. And we'll have to do this again soon.
Would love to. Thanks for having me, Angie.
So that is it. Another awesome episode of Permission to Kick Ass on the books. If you want to know more about the show, if you want to know more about me, Angie Coley, and the mission I'm on to help entrepreneurs punch fear in the face and do big, bold things, then head on over to permissiontokickass.com. That is all one word together, permissiontokickass.com. Make sure to sign up for my email list so that you know whenever there's a hot, fresh, and ready podcast episode out for you. And also on Mondays, I like to send out a little newsletter called Kick Monday's Ass. I'm sure you're totally surprised by that. So thank you for being here with me today. I'm Angie Coley. Make sure that you share this with a friend that needs to hear this message today. Like it, share it, comment wherever you're listening to this today, and let's go kick some ass.